have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello, this is Val, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the June 28th issue of the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Reading Service. The first article is by Vince Stangro and Julie Silverbook from the Fulcrum, and it's titled, Use America's 250th to Strengthen and Renew This Country's Civic Life. As the nation approaches its 250th anniversary this July 4th, an uneasy feeling hangs over many of the celebrations, that this moment feels smaller than it should, less unified, less transcendent, less shared. There is a growing sense that America's 250th anniversary is arriving without the kind of shared civic feeling such a milestone might have once inspired. That should not surprise us. The institutions, habits, and experiences that once drew Americans together into a common civic fabric have changed. Our media landscape is fragmented. Our politics are polarized. Americans increasingly experience public life through separate cultural, political, and digital communities rather than through shared national rituals. But that does not diminish the significance of this anniversary. In many ways, it heightens it. A nation's 250th birthday is not meaningful because unity arrives automatically or because disagreement disappears. It is meaningful because it offers an opportunity to renew the habits of civic life, reflect on the responsibilities of self-government, and recommit ourselves to the shared constitutional project that connects Americans across generations. The mistake would be waiting for one grand national moment and missing the thousands of meaningful civic moments now unfolding across the country. Across America, museums, libraries, classrooms, historic sites, parks, houses of worship, and civic organizations are preparing hundreds of new exhibits, performances, conversations, reenactments, concerts, community service opportunities, and family experiences that invite Americans to engage deeply with our shared story. Some of these moments will happen on a grand scale. Philadelphia's Wawa Welcome America Festival will bring together millions for concerts, fireworks, public programs, and civic gatherings across the birthplace of American democracy, including the family-friendly red, white, and blue to-do across Philadelphia's historic district, where the National Constitution Center is proud to join fellow cultural and historic partners in welcoming families from around the city, nation, and world for a joyful celebration. During Independence Week, on July 3rd, the center will also host a special Liberty Medal ceremony honoring American-born Pope Leo XIV and his commitment to religious liberty and freedom of conscience. New York Harbor will welcome the world through Sail Forth 2050, featuring the largest flotilla of tall ships ever assembled in the Port of New York and New Jersey. Washington, D.C. will host major exhibitions and public commemorations on the National Mall, while Boston and communities across Massachusetts will recreate pivotal Revolutionary era moments that invite Americans to reflect on the ideas and sacrifices that shaped the nation. In Virginia, traveling museum initiatives and statewide commemorations will bring stories of the founding and civic participation directly into communities across the Commonwealth and beyond. Elsewhere, Americans will encounter the anniversary in quieter but no less meaningful ways. Community mural projects in West Virginia, Liberty Tree plantings in Kentucky, storytelling projects collecting family histories, museum trucks traveling rural America, neighborhood block parties, local historical society exhibits, and naturalization ceremonies welcoming new citizens into the American experiment. And perhaps most important, millions of Americans will encounter this anniversary not primarily through pomp, parades, or fireworks, but with friends and family around kitchen tables, at backyard barbecues, during family road trips, while reading stories aloud with children, or while reflecting together on the ideals, responsibilities, and gifts of the American citizenship. That matters. Civic life has always depended less on spectacle than on participation. As leaders of the National Constitutional Center, we believe deeply in the lasting power of these commemorative moments because our institution itself is a product of one. The center was born out of the bicentennial of the Constitution in 1987, when Americans recognized the need for a permanent institution dedicated to constitutional education and civic dialogue. The investments made then continue to shape civic life nearly 4 decades later. That history should remind us that anniversaries are not endpoints, they are invitations. America's 250th cannot merely be a single year, a single ceremony, or a passing celebration. It must be the beginning of something larger, a civic decade stretching toward the Constitution's 250th anniversary in 2037 and the Bill of Rights 250th in 2041. Because anniversaries, at their best, do not simply ask us to remember. They ask us to recommit, to renew the habits of citizenship, to strengthen the institutions of civic life, to prepare the next generation not only to inherit the American experiment in self-government, but to help lead and sustain it. If we meet this moment with seriousness and imagination, the semi-quincentennial can become more than a commemoration of who we were. It can shape who we aspire to be. So our plea is simple. Do not let America's 250th pass you by. Attend the parade, visit the museum, read the Declaration of Independence aloud with your family, volunteer in your community, travel to a historic site, bring your children to a reenactment, concert, lecture, or naturalization ceremony. Ask questions, listen to stories, reflect together on the enduring ideals of the Declaration of Independence and the privileges and responsibilities of citizenship in a constitutional democracy. The 250th will not be defined by a single televised moment or one national stage. Its meaning will be found in the millions of acts of participation, reflection, service, curiosity, and civic connection across the country. The 250th will be what we make of it. Fitz Stango is interim president and CEO, and Julie Silverbrook is chief content and learning officer of the National Constitutional Center. The next article is written by Julie Tinker, who is a principal at Hope Lab, a nonprofit focused on improving the mental health and well-being of young people. And it's titled, Here's How We Can Help Youths Who Are Stressed Out. In May, the Journal of American Medical Association Network released a study showing that doctor visits for children's anxiety rose by more than 250% in 10 years. If we only respond with more clinical visits and prescriptions, we miss the chance to invest in the everyday conditions that help prevent anxiety in the first place. Unstructured social time, accessible extracurriculars, walkable neighborhoods, and teen-friendly public spaces, the well-being infrastructure we should fund in proportion to the benefits it provides. Good health and well-being, both physical and mental, do not happen by accident. They do not happen only by stepping in when a young person is in a major mental health emergency, although such services are essential. For youth to truly flourish, we need to focus on conditions that lead to thriving mental health and a commitment to building youth well-being infrastructure, the physical environments, social systems, and policies that promote long-term physical, mental, and emotional health. Fortunately, we're not starting from scratch. Young people already know what helps them thrive. We just need to support it more creatively and consistently. In a recent youth voice poll by my organization, Hope Lab, and the Center for Data Progress, which surveyed over 1,200 young people between the ages of 13 and 24, respondents were clear about what helps their mental health a lot or quite a bit. Face-to-face time with friends, 67%, time outdoors, 61%, and being creative, 54%. What would it look like to support infrastructure that provides young people face-to-face time, creativity, and access to the outdoors? It might look like the West Suburban YMCA in Massachusetts, which runs a dedicated teen center open 7 days a week and explicitly framed as the perfect spot to hang out after school or on the weekends. Teens can drop in to relax, play ping pong, air hockey, and console games, watch TV, or do homework with staff present to support positive relationships rather than run a therapy program. The well-being infrastructure for young people might also look like innovative green spaces that coax everyone to spend more time there while interacting with others. More and more research shows that simply being outside, exposed to nature, improves our well-being. So projects that encourage social interaction outdoors would do double duty, providing both restorative and social environments. One example, Washington, D.C.'s 11th Street Bridge Park, a new elevated public park project on an old freeway bridge over the Anacostia River. The project is intentionally designed to promote health and well-being with outdoor performance spaces, playgrounds, and urban agriculture education meant to foster long-term social connection alongside affordable housing and small businesses that weave outdoor access together with community needs. Well-being infrastructure also looks like well-funded opportunities to engage in the arts and in activities that bring young people joy, perspective, and connection to each other and the world around them. LA County's Creative Wellbeing Initiative, for example, uses healing-informed arts education, creative writing, dance, music, theater, visual and media arts to support young people, including children who experience foster care and youth affected by the juvenile justice system. A society that truly values youth mental health would fund an abundant number of these programs indoors and outdoors for all ages. It would increase funding in schools, libraries, parks, and community centers for the kinds of experiences young people themselves say support their well-being. To be sure, many communities already invest as best they can in beautiful parks and community programs, but too often these are seen as nice to have, not essential infrastructure for our health and our future. Meanwhile, proximity and access to these spaces and experiences remain deeply unequal across the country. At a time when our youth are deeply at risk, we should listen to them when they tell us what works and what we're doing right. From ballot measures that increase funding for libraries, parks, and schools, to visionary projects like the 11th Street Bridge Park, our kids need support from the infrastructure and the world. We build around them to thrive. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Another Voice by Rosanna Bernardi, the managing partner of Bernardi Immigration Law. Domestic violence is a growing threat. In the past month, Western New York has lost at least 3 women to the men who were supposed to love them. Aisha Abdullah, 26, was killed in Cheektowaga alongside her 2 young sons, ages 3 and 4. Deanna Kristen, 50, was shot to death in her Clarence home, the first homicide in her town in 3.5 years. Ruby Stiglmeyer, 51, was killed in Orchard Park by a partner she had already gone to court to protect herself from. 3 names, 3 towns most of us drive through without a second thought. And here's the part that should unsettle us most. Most of us barely noticed. These stories disappeared under the next news cycle. Buffalo's Family Justice Center has been blunt about this. Violent crime and homicide in our region are at historic lows. Domestic violent homicides are not following that trend. They are climbing, even as everything else falls. That should be a hot headline. Instead, it's a footnote. Part of the reason is that domestic violence doesn't look like the crime we're trained to fear. It happens behind a door we assume is safe. It's easier to file these stories under personal tragedy than public crisis, because the alternative means admitting this could be the house next door. Statistically, it often is. 1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in her lifetime. That is someone you know. When a story repeats often enough, our minds protect us by going quiet. That instinct is human. It is also exactly what allows this to keep happening without consequence. Erie County has a high-risk team that meets monthly to flag the most dangerous cases. Advocates, hotlines, and protective orders are already at work. And still, the women keep dying. We stop treating these deaths as isolated incidents and start naming them as a pattern, because patterns demand a different response. We ask why a case was flagged as high risk or wasn't, and what changes after each one. We fund and show up for organizations already doing this work: the Family Justice Center, Be Safe, Crisis Services. And we check on the women in our lives who have gone quiet, who have started making excuses for someone, not with judgment, with a door left open. Aisha, Deanna, Ruby. Say their names, then do something that makes the next list shorter. My View by Joe Cruz. He thinks quitting could be the bravest and smartest action to take. At times, quitting is the best option. Every morning, I swim. There is something about standing at the edge of a cold pool that never changes. It does not matter whether the water is 78 degrees or 68. It feels cold. Your mind starts negotiating. Maybe ease in. Maybe wait a second. I do not. I put in my earplugs, adjust my goggles, and jump. 1 second of shock, and then I'm swimming. Staring at the water has never made it any warmer. At some point, you either jump or you do not. That moment, feet over the edge, is a metaphor for a lot in life. Most of us have our version of it: a job change, a move, a hard conversation, a relationship, a decision we keep postponing because we want certainty first. I've had my fair share of plunges. Nearly everyone I admire has had a moment like that. They stood at the edge, felt the hesitation, and went anyway. Different personalities, different styles, same basic act of courage. Some plunge head first, others go feet first. Some need a pep talk, some need a deadline. Some need a couple of false starts before they move. But sooner or later, the ones who grow are the ones who jump. Recently, my son had his own moment. He is less impulsive and more deliberate than I am. He took his time, looked hard at his options, and then made a decision that surprised some people. He quit a very good job because he believed that there was a better future ahead and wanted a life that fit who he was becoming. When he told me, I laughed and said, "Welcome to the Quitters Club. Some people have it in them and some don't." I meant it as a joke, but there is truth in it. I once heard NFL coach Mike Ditka tell a story about his son coming to him about a boss who was never going to change. Ditka's advice was simple: quit. The word quitter gets a bad reputation, but sometimes quitting is exactly the right thing to do. It's not failure, it's judgment. It's the refusal to stay parked in a life that no longer fits. The hesitation before a leap is always the same. So is the lesson that follows. We spend far more time standing at the edge than we do in the discomfort itself. The anticipation is worse than the reality. The water is cold, yes, but only for a moment. Then you're moving. Former Olympic hopeful Kathy Kelly told me there was a time-release video that was done at the warm-up pool at the 2012 London Olympics. It was part of the coverage, and they showed the video of the warm-up pool and found the average those elite athletes took 12 minutes to get into the pool. That detail stayed with me because it makes the point perfectly. Even the best in the world feel hesitation. That may be what we forget. We imagine the pain of change lasting forever, when in reality, the sharpest part is usually the second before action. Once we commit, something shifts. We find our rhythm. We start looking forward instead of backward. There is always a cost to action, but there is also a cost to standing still. At some point in every season of life, you find yourself standing at the edge of cold water. You can measure it, analyze it, and talk about it all day long. The water will not get warmer. The moment will not get easier. So when your turn comes, remember this: it is only cold for a second, then you are swimming. Buffalo News wrote an editorial, "Affordability on the Waterfront. Objections to Canal Side's Penrose housing project dismiss economic realities." A group of downtown developers and business leaders object to a plan to build 251 apartments on the North Aud block at Canal Side because they believe the project includes too much very low income and federally subsidized housing. It's difficult to see their point given where we are at this moment. In an economic environment where affordability is the biggest concern across the board, from gas pump to grocery store to doctor's office, affordable housing is the most glaring area of high need and low availability. Penrose, a Philadelphia-based developer, plans to construct 3 multi-story buildings on the site of the former Memorial Auditorium, featuring apartments, commercial space, and community uses. This is the last significant site within the Canal Side that remains undeveloped. As reported by the News' Jonathan D. Epstein, the project initially started with a proposed mix of 70% market rate apartment units and 30% affordable housing. But given current conditions, Penrose found it difficult to finance this plan and modified the project to 75% affordable housing, 25% market rate. The affordable component would be equally split between households earning no more than 80%, 60%, and 40% of the area median income of $101,000. Critics of that shift argue that the change, which they call 11th hour, should have gone through public review and that the project has quietly strayed from the community's vision for the waterfront. A letter addressed to the governor, other officials, and state agencies was written by trial attorney Terrence M. Connors on behalf of Paul F. Simonelli, CEO of Simonelli Real Estate Corporation, Chris Jacobs, president of Avalon Development, Larry Quinn for the Golisano Institute, William Palladino, CEO of Ellicott Development Company, and others. The group called on the Erie Canal Harbor Development Corporation to return the $190 million project to its original focus of predominantly market rate housing, arguing that such housing is necessary to create a vibrant downtown waterfront district and was a prominent feature of the original 210 scoping plan for Canalside. To put it mildly, development conditions have shifted over 16 years. Investors are much more difficult to find as construction and other costs have soared. The rents needed to cover those costs aren't realistic in Buffalo. Many developments have stalled or foundered as a result. On the bright side, housing aimed at local members of the workforce, first responders, teachers, and nurses, for example, is a laudable goal. Governor Kathy Hochul, who has made affordable housing a key priority, has defended the shift, as has the Erie County HDC and its parent, Empire State Development Corporation, with spokesman Laura McGee stating, "The vision of Canalside is to bring waterfront development and access to all City of Buffalo residents." Rents will range from $757 per month for a one-bedroom unit at the 40% AMI level to $2,950 for a three-bedroom market rate apartment. Keep in mind that the 80% AMI level would call for rents of $1,700, hardly a bargain rate in Buffalo. If this range is adhered to, an important point, the Penrose development will represent a fair mix of income levels. It must be noted that some objections from this group have been expressed in a way that sounds more elitist than it was likely intended. The letter also fails to address the negative outcomes of this prominent waterfront space remaining vacant until such time, and when will that be, as market rate housing development is feasible. But these critics do have a point about transparency. Such a major change in the project, including much greater public subsidies, should have been done openly, with community input. They are also correct that nearby low-income housing projects, such as Marine Drive apartments, already address affordability needs. At the end of the day, this is the question. Can Canalside be a vibrant community with mixed income housing that accurately reflects who and what Buffalo is? We would hope so. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Susan Estrick from Creators Syndicate has written an editorial, "Hillary's Right, Biden's Decision to Run Again Cost Democrats dearly. In a recent new interview, Hillary Clinton identified the key decision that resulted in President Trump's election in 2024. It all boiled down, in her view, to a terrible miscalculation, former President Joe Biden's decision to run for re-election. Biden made a terrible mistake for himself, his legacy, and for the country in deciding to seek re-election at 81. Had he decided to pass the torch and the Democratic Party had held a competitive nomination process, whoever emerged from that contest, whether it was the vice president or a governor or a senator or anybody else, would have beaten Donald Trump. Or, I would add, they would have had a better chance than Biden did. Joe and Jill Biden clearly lived in a state of denial with respect to his unpopularity. In some respects, it's understandable. He wasn't a bad president, and he left the country in better shape than it is now. So why shouldn't Jill think that even though she was afraid her husband was having a stroke during the debate with Trump, he should stay in the race? If he had, they both seem to believe, he would have beaten Trump. It's delusional thinking that must have been reinforced by the deep-seated loyalty of those who had been around him for so long. Sadly, the cost of that delusional thinking is being borne around the world. The Democratic Party is still struggling to figure out what went wrong. The unofficial official autopsy report, which the party commissioned and then disowned, studiously avoided any criticism of Biden's decision to seek re-election, which cast doubt on the rest of the report. Of course, the question remains, was Kamala Harris the right candidate? That's the one that even Hillary avoided, pointing out that Kamala would have been a stronger candidate if she'd emerged from a competitive process. But would she have emerged from a competitive process, that is? Harris was the vice president for an unpopular president. She was caught between defending the indefensible and attacking her own administration. She never figured out how to walk that line in the general election, and there's no reason to think it would have been easier in the primaries. The simple fact that Democrats need to accept is that Americans preferred the convicted felon to the vice president. They got to see them both up close. Harris ran a better campaign than she gets credit for. She did put her best foot forward. She was well-financed. Experienced strategists surrounded her. She did not use a primary email server as Hillary did. She did not have investigators nipping at her heels the way Hillary did. It was, considering everything, a smooth run. She just didn't win. I have yet to hear any explanation why she's a stronger candidate today than 2024, and she would need to be a stronger candidate to defeat a Marco Rubio, for instance. Kamala is leading in most, though not all, of the early polls, but that is a matter of name recognition. Perhaps more significant is the fact that a majority of Democrats at this stage favor candidates other than Harris. And Harris has done almost nothing since the election to distinguish herself as the party's leader. Soon enough, we will be hearing more, not only from Gavin Newsom, who is already out there and being investigated for it, but from J.B. Pritzker and Josh Shapiro and Pete Buttigieg, not to mention John Ossoff, Ro Khanna, and AOC. The nomination process is flawed in many ways, but at least it's a test, one that Kamala will be forced to pass this time. From Harap, also from Creators Syndicate, wrote an editorial titled, "We should be voting on ideas, not identity or physical likeness." MS Now commentator Ali Velshi was not alone in complaining that women are underrepresented in Congress. It is true that women account for 51% of the U.S. population, but just 29% of House members, to which I say, so what? Basing the notion of fair representation on racial, gender, or ethnic identity needs to be put in a folder. Most of us have additional identities as electricians, teachers, environmentalists, grandparents, bus drivers, stock investors, union members. Who would represent me under this broader definition? Someone with brown hair who streams a lot of true crime, who has too many opinions and used to play the flute? That perfect human being has yet to appear on my ballot. If she did, I might not vote for her anyway if we disagreed on tariffs, green energy, and immigration. The founders designed a republic in which representatives would debate ideas. Besides, people of similar physical identities disagree on a lot of things, including matters tied to identity. This DNA-based notion of fair representation comes up in the thorny matter of redistricting, the redrawing of House districts in ways that would allegedly help one party. Donald Trump kicked off the latest round. Panicky that Democrats might swamp the midterms, he's pushed Republican-controlled states to change the lines to remove so-called safe Democratic districts, or so he thinks. Democratic-controlled states countered with their own gerrymandering. Trump was responding to a recent Supreme Court ruling, Louisiana versus Calais, which weakened limits on the Voting Rights Act of 1965 on race-based redistricting. He apparently believes that dividing black people among majority white districts would leave them too small a share of the vote to elect their preferred candidate. The assumption under that assumption is that black voters agree on who should represent them. Consider the lively primary race in a newly redrawn South Florida district. Representative Debbie Wasserman Schultz, a Democrat, decided to run in a largely black district after Governor Ron DeSantis helped erase her own district lines. A lot of the people in the community are angry, said Dale Holness, a former Broward County commissioner who is African American. By community, we assume he means black community. Many of these constituents have interests beyond the race of their representative. Issues such as Social Security, medical coverage, abortion, the war with Iran, gasoline prices, and more. John Beckford, a Broward business leader originally from Jamaica, is black. He says that Schultz has always been a part of the African American black community, the Caribbean community. It's not like she's now a stranger trying to make herself known. Business owners and other voters of all colors might want to retain a rep who is a senior member of the powerful House Appropriations Committee, which sends federal money to the districts. That interest might double in the likely event that Democrats take control of the House in the midterms. Opponents of the current GOP leadership tactics hold that the redistricting mania will lead to less representation of black voters, but others argue the exact opposite, and they include Republicans. The partisans who think they are cleverly scattering black voters into white majority districts would also be increasing the black voters' clout in those same districts. History should also have a say. A black man was elected president twice by a majority white electorate. There are reasons to support a candidate other than resemblance to self, and those tend to be the better reasons. I will now read letters from the readers in everybody's column. The first letter is written by Paul Brown, the president of Buffalo and Erie County Construction Trades. Hochul was the key to the new stadium. June 5th, 2023 marked the third anniversary of the official groundbreaking ceremony for the new Bills Stadium. The official ribbon cutting happened Tuesday, though a few finishing touches remain. It's a good time to reflect on the journey to where, in just a few weeks, the new stadium will be welcoming hordes of Bills Mafia in the quest for the team's first Super Bowl championship. In my mind, it starts and stops with one name, Governor Kathy Hochul. I know the approximately 1,500 men and women from the Building Trades Union feel the same. Let's be brutally honest. If it wasn't for Hochul, there would be no new stadium and likely no team. Of course, other leaders were involved, but as we know, if you don't have an all-world quarterback, your team is going nowhere. Hochul quarterbacked the financial support to make the stadium a reality, despite some significant pushback. Through it all, the governor demonstrated great perseverance in her effort to secure the state funding, and she did it with enthusiasm because, like so many of us, she loves the Buffalo Bills. So on behalf of the union workers across the region and millions of Bills fans from around the world, thank you to Governor Hochul for getting us over the goal line in building a championship stadium. Go Bills. The next letter is from Doug M. Filipski from East Aurora. Let people tour the stadium for free. Recently, a gentleman from Buffalo wrote to suggest the Bills should run tours of the new stadium for the public for a nominal fee. The tour idea is a good one. The fee is not. New York and Erie County kicked in $850 million toward construction of the stadium. That's taxpayer money, and I believe technically that the Erie County Stadium Corporation owns the stadium. If tours are offered, they should be free. Between taxpayer dollars, PSLs, increased ticket prices, and probably increased parking fees and concession costs, I don't believe any more money needs to be sucked out of the pockets of Western New Yorkers. B.J. Stasio of Buffalo wrote that the voices of the disabled people will be heard. Enough is enough. I understand these are uncertain and frightening times for many people, especially people with disabilities and the families who support them. Too often, decisions are made about us without us. Too often, our voices are treated as an afterthought rather than an essential part of the conversation. But let us remember something important. Our disabilities are not weaknesses. They are part of who we are. They have shaped our experiences, strengthened our resilience, and given us gifts that help change the world every day. We cannot allow fear, politics, or indifference to erase the progress that generations of advocates fought so hard to achieve. The rights we have today were not given to us. They were earned through courage, persistence, and the willingness of people to stand up and say, we belong. As a person with a disability and as a leader in the disability community, I am frustrated. I am concerned, but I am not defeated. There is still too much work to do, and that work belongs to all of us. We must speak up. We must speak out. We must tell our stories. We must remind those in positions of power that government exists to serve all people, including people with disabilities. Our lives matter, our voices matter, our choices matter. I believe it is time for a national effort, a letter-writing campaign called Enough is Enough, a movement that reminds elected officials, agency leaders, and communities across this country that people with disabilities will not be silent when our rights, opportunities, and futures are at stake. My message to agency directors, policymakers, advocates, families, and allies is simple. along with us, stand with us, listen to us, work alongside us. And to every person with a disability, be proud of who you are. Do not let anyone convince you that your voice does not matter. Enough is enough. Our voices will be heard. You are listening to a reading of articles and features from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. The next letter to the editor is from Charles Harmon in East Amherst. Elmwood plan should have smaller storefronts. The proposed 5-story, 230-unit mixed-use development at 680 Amherst Street, where Volker's Lanes once stood, represents a real opportunity for the Elmwood Village and Grant Amherst District. That said, the current plan's single 8,737 square foot commercial floor plate is a missed opportunity. One large, undivided commercial space sounds impressive on paper. In practice, it risks sitting empty for years while developers search for a single anchor tenant willing to absorb that footprint. We've seen this play out at Forest and Elmwood, where a comparable space sat vacant for nearly a decade. The neighborhood deserves better than another long-term gap in street life. The alternative is right in front of us, literally. Across Amherst and Elmwood sits CVS, a Sunoco station, and a growing cluster of small businesses like Moriarty Meats and Cafe and their new dry goods store. That's the commercial energy this neighborhood has worked hard to build. The new building should match it. Divide that ground floor into 12 smaller storefronts, 800 to 1,200 square foot each, facing both Elmwood and Amherst. Look at Millrace Commons on Seneca Street in Larkinville. Small format retail, nearly 100% occupancy since opening. Flexible spaces attract diverse tenants, adapt over time, and keep streets activated. The planning board should require the developer to redesign the commercial component before approval. Small storefronts, activated corners, a development that actually serves the neighborhood it's entering. Grace Johnson in Ransomville wrote, USAID cuts enabled spread of screwworm. Multiple New World screwworm cases have been confirmed in the United States. This flesh-eating parasite has infected cattle, goats, and a dog. Researchers estimate that American cattle ranchers could lose billions of dollars this year if the parasite continues to spread, and dogs and horses across the country could be killed. In the 1960s, screwworm was eradicated from America thanks to robust foreign assistance. A joint operation between the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and the Department of Agriculture enabled dropping sterile flies around the U.S.-Mexico border. Today, American labs only have the capacity to drop 100 million sterile flies. That is 400 million less than scientists estimate is needed to prevent further spread. Worse, last year, the Trump administration gutted USAID, including a program to monitor and contain the spread of screwworm in Central America. Diseases do not respect borders. When we gut international assistance, Americans suffer. I don't want my dog to die because our government allowed parasites to spread out of control. USAID represented less than 1% of the federal budget, yet saved millions of lives each year and prevented Ebola, screwworm, and other diseases from reaching our shores. Representatives Tim Kennedy and Senators Chuck Schumer and Kristen Gillibrand should restore our strategic international assistance programs. The last letter is from Larry Gustina of Buffalo, country is being ruined, not run. The Trump administration has effectively kidnapped our independence, the backbone of our democracy, by perpetuating the most baseless lie ever concocted in the history of our country. They claim the 2020 election was rigged, stolen by Joe Biden. Since Trump's re-election in 2024, our commander of chaos, corruption, and cruelty has chosen not to run the country, but to ruin the country. His hunger for vengeance is a serious illness, and its assault on the rules of law threatens every single one of us. Who is going to stop this assault? The press is trying, our courts are working overtime, yet our Congress remains totally silent, which signals their capitulation, complicity, and complete consent. They remain spineless. Our beacon of democracy has been extinguished by the repeated illegal and unconstitutional directives issued daily by a fraudulent president. A return to common decency, common sense, and common civility must be demanded, and this traitor should be removed from office as soon as possible. In a spotlight on economy, David Robinson has written an article titled "Where AC is Common and Scarce in Western New York." If you live in the Buffalo-Niagara suburbs, there's an excellent chance that you have air conditioning in your home. If you live in Buffalo, the odds are lower. Earlier this month, the Buffalo News took a look at how common air conditioning is across Western New York using new data from the U.S. Census Bureau. That data showed that Erie County has the highest rate of air conditioning in the region at 87%, while it was lowest in Allegheny County at just under 68%. All 8 Western New York counties had air conditioning rates that were lower than the statewide average of 90.2% and the national average of 93.1%. But even within those counties, the availability of air conditioning can vary widely when the data is broken down to areas as small as a census tract. At that level, air conditioning is available in as little as 60% of the homes in some Buffalo neighborhoods and in the mid-60s range across much of southern Erie County. The highest availability at 98.4% is in the East Amherst neighborhood bounded by Hopkins, Casey, Klein, and Transit Road, and a nearby neighborhood in Clarence bounded by Sheridan Drive and Transit, Roll, and Thompson Road. The air conditioning data is more than just a curiosity. The information is valuable to first responders as they prepare for potential calls during heat waves, the Census Bureau said. Matt Glynn wrote an article called "DeUville Names Camposio as Dean of the Medical School." DeUville University has named Dr. Nicholas Camposio the new dean of its College of Osteopathic Medicine, which will welcome its first students in August. Camposio most recently served as the medical school's Associate Dean for Clinical Medical Education. DeUville said he was among the first employees hired to help build the program. As we prepare to welcome our first class of student physicians, it was important to have a permanent dean in place who understands the mission of the college, the needs of our student, and the healthcare challenges facing our region, said Lori Climo, DeUville's president. Nick's leadership, experience, and long-standing professional connections throughout Western New York make him exceptionally well-suited to lead the college through its successful launch and continued growth, she said. Jay Danto, who served as the medical school's interim dean, has resigned from DeUville. Danto was named interim dean after Dr. Sean Cannon, the medical school's first ever dean, resigned in October 2025. In an interview earlier this year, Cannon cited dissatisfaction with his work situation at DeUville as the reason for his departure. Camposio received an undergraduate degree from the University of Buffalo and earned his Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine degree from Nova Southeastern University in Florida. He completed his emergency medicine residency at UB and is a board-certified emergency medical physician at the Erie County Medical Center. Helping build the medical school from the ground up has been one of the most rewarding experiences of my career, Camposio said. It is an honor to serve as dean as we welcome our inaugural class and continue building a medical school that is focused on excellence, innovation, and service. D'Youville said the medical school's inaugural class is full at 90 students. The College of Osteopathic Medicine will hold classes on D'Youville's West Side campus in the upcoming academic year. Plans for the medical school to move to 285 Delaware Avenue, an office building that is being renovated, will occur in fall 2027. D'Youville plans to expand the medical school's enrollment over time to a projected 720 student physicians by 2031. As the medical school prepares to get off the ground, it has dealt with internal conflict. Over the past several months, D'Youville fired an associate dean of the school, released 2 professors, and let go a 3rd professor who said he was prepared to resign. And now Danto, the former interim dean, has departed. In interviews, the former faculty members said they were upset by how their departures were handled and were dismayed before they were let go before classes even began. D'Youville declined to comment on the departures, citing its policy of not discussing personnel matters. Separately, D'Youville said its Doctor of Physical Therapy program was reaffirmed accreditation through 2036 by the Commission on Accreditation in Physical Therapy Education. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the Sunday, June 28th issue of the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News. We read from the Viewpoints section of the Buffalo News every Sunday at 6 p.m. Your reader has been Val. Thank you for listening.
Coming up next in the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service, we have the National Enquirer. At 8 p.m., we have People Magazine. And at 9 o'clock, we have the New York Times Book Review. Stay tuned for these readings and more. And if you have any comments, suggestions, or questions, please stay with us. If you're listening to this publication online, you're probably using our website, a podcast player like Spotify or iTunes, a streaming service like Siro, or a smart speaker. Did you know that we now have a dedicated app that can be downloaded to any mobile device, like a smartphone or tablet, for free? App users can conveniently access our live stream and any episode of our podcast easier than ever. To download the app, just type NFRRS in the search window in the Apple App Store or in the Google Play Store. Contact us anytime if you have any questions by calling 716-821-5555, extension 5. Thank you. following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability, which makes reading